One of the things that lawyers in solo practice need and rely upon are referrals. And I spent my career building connections and doing things for people and building a referral base. Now, I was active in a lot of programs in the 70s under the Head Start. I was counsel to the Head Start program in Boulder. I was one of the advisors when they started the various outside programs such as the Clinica. I advised them on that. I was on several advisory boards. And in the process, and also when I ran for office, in the process I met a lot of people. A lot of people recommended me, a lot of people referred people to me, and I had a very different view of the practice of law. For me, law was more of a calling than it was a profit center. I was never an entrepreneur, and that's probably why, under a lot of definitions, I would be considered a failure as a lawyer, because I didn't make a lot of money. I wasn't into it for a lot of money. I was into it for the politics and to help people, things like this. So one of the things that I did was, because I was more interested in the process, and I was trained as a sociologist and had a lot of advanced work in sociology, a lot of graduate level studies, such as conflict resolution and large-scale organization, etc. I studied law also during the profession as an institution and studied its structure and function and logged the change. One of the changes that I've absolutely convinced has occurred is we no longer have a common law system. We have a Napoleonic code system, and we've got a bunch of idiots and numbnuts running the system now because they don't understand what the hell they're doing. They read a bunch of statutes and say that's the law and have no idea of the purpose behind the law or the philosophy or jurisprudential reasoning. One of the best examples I can think of right now is several years ago, a minister and his friend referred a woman to me. The minister was in a local jurisdiction at the eastern edge of Boulder County, ERIE actually, and the friend had 2 law degrees from University of Texas, JD and an LLM, and he was one of the administrators of the federal agency that was pretty prominent in Colorado at the time. It was the Park Service, or not the Park Service, Department of Interior. Anyway, these 2 gentlemen came to see me and they said, we want you to take this case. We want you to defend this woman. She's charged with abuse of the elderly, and it's a miscarriage of justice. Apparently, a young prosecutor had read the statute that we now had. It was just recently enacted that it was a felony to abuse elderly, and any time an elder person got hurt, that was considered abuse. So they decided to cook the books a little bit and build up their statistics and charge this woman with abuse of the elderly. She was the caretaker for her father. Her father was an old cowboy. They lived in what was left of their ranch. They still had horses, etc. He was a widower and raised the daughter and was a strict disciplinarian. He used to enforce his discipline actually by occasionally taking the buggy whip to her and beating her. this was the environment in which this woman was brought up. Well, he met this young lady, I think 40 years his junior, and she wooed him and screwed him and things such as this, and eventually moved in. Well, the minister and some of the people at their church knew the woman was a gold digger, and they were concerned that she was going to get her claws into this old guy and take him for his ranch and things like this, which eventually did happen. So the minister went and talked to the daughter and informed the daughter of his suspicions and asked the daughter to sort of watch out for her father a little bit more than she had been. She lived next door, and to maybe be careful and watch this young lady, make sure that she didn't take her father. Well, when the young lady moved in with the old guy, she decided she had had enough and she'd intercede. So one day she went over to his place. The woman was there drying dishes or something, and she was in there and got in an argument with her father. Now, it's been my experience through my career that sometimes parents argue with their kids, or kids argue with their parents, and that's just one of the ways of growing up. The other thing that I have been big on and teach sometimes, along with a course in postmodern social theory, is sociology of knowledge and sociology of social psychology. One of the concepts there is how we construct reality, or the social construction of reality. And for these two people, the construction of reality involved violence as a way of communication. Unfortunately, that seems to happen quite a bit. And although many rich suburban housewives aren't subjected to violence, they're abhorred by violence, and they, without understanding, criticize violence or run a crusade and think the only way to create any change with violence is to put somebody in jail, or at least prosecute them. Like prosecution is the answer rather than social workers, educators, etc. Having studied the process, I can say that is just absolute bullshit. But how you gonna take these women or middle class people in general? I wouldn't define it or confine it just to women, but middle class people in general. How are you going to convince them that the police aren't everything? If you're having trouble with your kid, you don't call the police to make him behave. There are several instances where that's happened, and the police have ended up shooting the kid and killing them. You have to use a little bit of common sense. You got to look at the rule of proportionality, which is no longer taught to policemen. Anyway, the woman's there arguing with her father, and they're having a cup of coffee together. And finally, in a disgusted manner, she took the coffee cup and threw it on the floor and walked out of the house. Now, she and her husband were retiring, and they were planning on moving out of town anyway. And the only thing that kept her there was the fact that she was a caretaker for her father and felt an obligation to be a caretaker. Well, the young lady, I don't want to call her a gold digger, but that's what we would, in the old days before politically correct behavior and language stifled our thoughts, called the police, called the sheriff. And the sheriff came out and she related the story and said the daughter threw the coffee cup on the ground in a violent manner, upsetting the father, causing him to fear for his safety and fear for his health, etc. There's all kinds of magic buzzwords that they teach these people. So they go and arrest the daughter. The daughter gets jailed, she makes bond, she gets out, and doesn't think her father loves her anymore for some reason. The minister gets concerned and comes to me, and we do the case. The prosecutor gets intransigent because he's going to send a message that he is for protecting the elderly and we got to protect the elderly, etc. In my estimation, they did a piss poor, negligent job of investigating the case, and it was politically inspired on the politics of showing the world that you're politically correct and you're protecting the elderly. The case finally came to fruition. It was deferred, and the woman essentially didn't even say goodbye to her father. She packed up and moved down the Lake of the Ozarks for her retirement. Now, who was protected? How was that protecting the elderly? The elderly gentleman lost his daughter, even though the relationship was somewhat volatile. He gets a young lady and very quickly becomes beyond Viagra. So what's he doing other than the fact she's sort of nice to him? And she hangs out till he croaks, whereupon she inherits a couple $1 million in real estate and in horses and things like this. Now, I would like to know, and I wish you could send me emails on whether you think this is just or not, whether it's justice or miscarriage of justice, whether it's fair or not fair. I really want your feedback here because it's important within some of the next steps I plan. I would like to know if you're as outraged as I am with this and whether we're using law enforcement to promote agendas rather than justice. I want to know whether we should allow the police and young prosecutors to have this much power, whether we should have more full investigations rather than assembly line justice. Think of this and please give me your feedback. It's dlblewett@gmail.com, or you can write on this thing here. That's all for tonight. I'll have more interesting things like that in the future. So thank you for listening. Bye.